About a month ago, as I was preparing for this talk, I was looking up sacred geometry and the Chartres Labyrinth on my computer. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and saw this out my kitchen window. And found out that it was an orb weaver web. An orb weaver web. And right here, it was for a week's worth, as far as I was watching it, right here, it was spinning a daily web. Days later, I remembered the words that I had woken up with 30 years from a dream 30 years earlier. A woman begins to know who she is when she finds the mythic thread woven through her own life tapestry. Marie von Franz, the Jungian, says, to have your own myth means to have suffered and struggled until an answer has come from the depths of your soul. That does not mean that this is the definitive truth, but rather this truth is relevant for oneself as one is now. I'm going to be sharing with you what is the truth for me now. Walking the Chartres for Peace Labyrinth, I cut these 4 templates: conception, implantation, forming a heart, and forming a 3-dimensional body, which are the 4 developmental stages delineated by Jaap van der Wal. I found them out of frustration, because I could not figure out where one developmental stage started and one ended, so I printed out the Chartres Cathedral on a piece of paper and I cut it as if I were walking the path, and out these 4 templates fell out by themselves. They symbolize the 4 critical stages, but they also symbolize the movements and exercises of spiritual formation. Now we're back at the web up here, from my forest home in Cleveland. And what I learned from the orb weaver was that it spins daily and it deconstructs it every night. And I became to understand that this had to do with the daily webs that we carry around with us. Sometimes things get stuck in here, that this is the hub, there's a free zone, this is the sticky, these are actually names of the web, this is the sticky spiral, out here is the frame. And things get imprinted on us daily, and sometimes we carry around with them. They hover over us. But underneath everything is the breath of life and its organizing matrix, something that, organizing blueprint, something that Franklin Sills calls the embryonic ordering imperative. So these templates, conception, implantation, forming a heart, and forming a body, are placed on the labyrinth where they actually fell out of the labyrinth template when I cut it. Admittedly, seeing the embryo as a spiritual master of transformative learning is not a typical way to support adult spiritual formation. They didn't know quite what to do with me at spiritual direction school. I use the spiritual exercises to help me resolve organically midlife crisis. And I reconceived myself, implanted into a life-giving community, learned how to love and be loved in new ways, and to be generative at midlife toward elderhood. Since my approach to adult spiritual direction formation is atypical, I had to find I had to have ground my embryo-adult living work in mystical writing, ancient tradition, pre- and perinatal accounts, pre- and perinatal psychology accounts, and spiritual practice like labyrinth walking. This is what you would see in an aerial view in the Chartres Cathedral, about an hour outside Paris. The Ghost Ranch Labyrinth is modeled after the one that was built in around 1201. One of many medieval cathedrals dedicated to Mary, the Chartres Labyrinth is a unicursal path. That means there's only one way in and one way out. It's different from mazes. Mazes are designed to confuse and confound. Labyrinths, you go in one way, you come out the same way. The path is 287 yards long, coincidentally the length of a human gestation. The 113 cusps, which are these right around here, cusps and foils. There's 113 cusps and 112 foils are thought to represent the 28.5-day lunar cycle. When you walk the path, you will have 34 turns, 28 of which are full reversals in direction, something that the embryo does, and it is reversed from expansion, centrifugal, and centripetal. These are 180-degree reversions. The rosette in the center is said to represent either Mary or the lotus in Eastern tradition. I interpret the 6 petals as the cardinal movements of birth: descent, flexion, engagement, internal rotation, external rotation, and birth. I am not alone in my womb approach to the labyrinth. There's a collective of women educator artists in Canada that call themselves Gestair, who call the walks they facilitate womb walking, in hopes of restoring the biomedical culture of childbirth. The liturgical themes of the architecture, art, and stained glass windows tell how the divine enter human form. This gives you the cavernous, I'm going to suggest maybe an embryonic view of being in the maternal body. If you walk in the entrance, you'll walk into the nave of the church, which is right here. If you reach to the center and look straight into this window, stained glass window, right above the high altar, you will see this. What is an embryo-adult? An embryo-adult living is an embodied path of transformative learning and spiritual formation, grounded in the wisdom of embryonic development and the primal period. This window, I want you to pay special attention because take a look at the black and white image on the right. Here, you can see that this is an old man. It's called a homunculus. There's another window of Mary holding the Christ that's a younger image. But for me, this image is an image of an embryo-adult. This orb is what the art historians call this, but Francis J. Mott, in Mythology of the Prenatal Period, says that the Aboriginal used to carry wooden discs around them as symbols of their placentas. I'm interpreting this as the placenta of this older spirit embryo. This term spirit embryo is aligned with immortal fetus in the Taoist tradition. In the alchemical tradition, the highest goal of a human being can aspire to is the fertilization, gestation, and birth of a higher person within the soul of the lower human personality. The second birth is known esoterically as the birth of the spirit embryo. It is the second birth of the spirit embryo is fertilized and then brought to term by the conscious work of the student. The spirit embryo is called the I Being by Rudolf Steiner, the True Self by Carl Jung, and the Parent Who Would Never Lie to Us by the Kahunas in Hawaii. These names all relate to different functions of a being that resides in human consciousness as if asleep and awakened only by conscious acts of will and rhythmic practice. These practices can be biodynamic craniosacral therapy, meditation, or walking a labyrinth, for example. This is hopefully what the labyrinth outside, it is a picture of the labyrinth, but it's been artistically manipulated on my computer. But hopefully it will be what the moonlight will look like. I want to give you an example of an embryo adult that I read about recently. This is Kathy Warren, and this is her account of her first labyrinth walk. I'll let you read it. My pre and perinatal psychology education training tells me that there may be some natalistic themes in the story Kathy tells about her walking the labyrinth, but I'm not a pre and perinatal therapist, so I follow the rules of doing this professional work with the labyrinth and I do my own work, I stay in my own lane, and I ask for help when needed. For those of you trained as pre and perinatal therapists, Kathy Warren has given me permission to share that she was a breech birth born feet first to a mother likely under the influence of ether given the time of the period of her birth 60-some years ago. No matter the practice, causes or explanations may never come. That's part of working with mystery. Each succeeding age formulates its characteristic concerns. Each era presents a different philosophical stance, but each one exists like an embryo waiting for its own time to be born in the womb of the preceding age. With the move away from myth, the labyrinth is understood to exist within the mind of the individual.